There is one day in every person's life that divides everything into before and after. Not the day something good happens. Not a graduation or a wedding or a promotion. I am talking about a different kind of day entirely. The day when you are standing in the middle of everything falling apart, and the easiest thing in the world, the most reasonable, the most forgivable, the most human thing, would be to simply stop. And you choose not to. That day does not announce itself. It does not arrive with music or clarity or a sign that says, "This is the moment." It arrives in the rain or in a silent room or in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday that looks exactly like every other Tuesday, and it asks you one question without words. Will you give up today? This is the story of the day Adam answered that question. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from right now, and what this story means to you by the time it ends. Please like and subscribe. Someone in your life needs to hear this today. Adam was 28 years old, and he had one dream, not a vague dream. Not the kind of comfortable, half-formed wish that lives in the back of a person's mind and never quite becomes a plan. Adam's dream had been specific since he was 19 years old, to build a school. Not a university or a grand institution. A small school, 10 rooms, maybe 12, in the village he had grown up in, 4 hours from the nearest city, where the nearest school was so far away that children walked 2 hours each direction every day just to attend, and many of them eventually stopped attending at all. He had grown up in that village. He had made that walk. He had watched his younger sister give up the walk at age 12. Because the roads were unsafe after dark in winter, and he had watched the light in her eyes change in the months afterward, the way a fire changes when you begin to starve it of what it needs. He had left at 18 on a scholarship that felt like a miracle and promised himself. In the way that young people promise themselves things when they are standing at the edge of something new and frightening, that he would come back, not to live, to build. 10 years later, the building had not happened. He had tried everything he could think of. Grant applications, 11 of them, rejected with form letters. Partnership proposals to NGOs who expressed interest and then went quiet. A crowdfunding campaign that raised 6% of its target before stalling. A meeting with a regional government official who had nodded and said all the right things and then never returned a single message. He had not given up. But he was running out of the specific kind of energy that hope requires to stay alive. The day came in October. He had traveled 4 hours by bus to attend a meeting with a foundation that had, for 3 months, given him every reason to believe this time would be different. They had requested a full proposal. He had spent 6 weeks writing it, nights mostly, after work, his actual job, the one that paid rent and kept him alive while the dream waited. They had responded with questions. He had answered everyone. They had requested a second meeting. He had taken an unpaid day from work to attend. He walked into that meeting with everything he had. He walked out 40 minutes later with a phrase he would remember for the rest of his life. "We admire your passion, but we do not fund individuals. We fund organizations." He was not an organization. He was one man with a dream and 11 rejection letters, and a sister whose fire had gone quiet at age 12. He walked out of the building. The rain started almost immediately, the way rain sometimes does, as though the sky has been waiting for exactly this moment to make its point. He had no umbrella. He had not checked the forecast because he had not expected to need to care about the forecast. He had expected to be inside, celebrating. He walked to the bus stop. The next bus back to the city was 2 hours away. He sat down on the wet bench, and he stayed there. He sat in that rain for a long time. And in the rain, something happened that he had never allowed to happen before. Not fully. Because every time it had begun to happen, he had reached for the next plan, the next application, the next reason to keep moving forward. And the reaching had kept him from having to fully sit inside the weight of what he was carrying. But there was nowhere to reach right now. The next plan required him to be back in his apartment, which was 2 hours away. The next application required him to be at his desk. There was nothing to do in the rain on the bench except be in the rain on the bench. So for the first time in 10 years, Adam stopped moving. And the weight arrived completely. It arrived as his sister's face at age 12, the day she told him she was not going back to school. It arrived as every application form he had filled out at a desk at midnight, alone, believing this one might be different. It arrived as his mother's voice on the phone 6 months ago, asking quietly, the way his mother asked things she was afraid to ask directly, "How is the school coming, son?" And his answer, the same answer he had given for years, "Still working on it, Mama, it is coming." When he was no longer certain that was true, he said something out loud to the rain, not to anyone in particular, to no one. "I am so tired," 3 words. But the truest 3 words he had said in years. Not "I am giving up," not "I am done." Just the truth of it, the simple, unbearable truth, spoken to a rain-soaked street at 4 p.m. on an October Tuesday. "I am so tired." An old man sat down on the other end of the bench. Adam had not heard him coming. He appeared the way people sometimes appear in rain, suddenly, completely, as though the weather had assembled him. He carried a small plastic bag and a walking stick and wore a rain jacket that had clearly been through many more October afternoons than this one. He sat down without acknowledging Adam and opened his plastic bag and took out a small wrapped sandwich and began to eat it with the focused calm of a man who had decided this bench, in this rain, was exactly where he intended to eat his lunch. They sat in silence for several minutes. Then the old man spoke, not looking at Adam, still eating. "You look like a man who just lost a fight." Adam almost said nothing, but something about the directness of it, no sympathy performance, no careful phrasing, loosened something in him. "12th fight," Adam said. "I have lost 12 of them." The old man chewed thoughtfully. "Same fight each time?" "Same fight," Adam said. 12 different ways of losing it." The old man folded the wrapper of his sandwich carefully and put it back in the plastic bag. He looked out at the rain. Adam looked out at the rain too. "I built a small clinic," the old man said after a while, "in a village. 30 years ago. You know how many times I was told no before someone said yes?" Adam turned to look at him. 19, the old man said. 19 times across 7 years. The 20th person said yes. Not because I had become better at asking, because I had become impossible to refuse. There is a difference. Impossible to refuse. Adam repeated. When a person asks for something 19 times, the old man said, they are still someone who could be talked out of it, convinced by the right argument that maybe it is not meant to be. The world senses that. It gives you the argument. When a person keeps asking after that, after the point where any reasonable person would have stopped, they become something different. Not desperate. Certain. Certain in a way that is uncomfortable for the world to look at and tell no, because it knows the no will not hold. He looked at Adam for the first time, directly, with the specific attention of someone who is about to say something that matters. "What number are you on?" 12, Adam said. The old man nodded slowly. "So you have 7 more no's ahead of you, at least. Probably more. The question is whether you understand that the no's are not verdicts. They are a filter. They are the world finding out if you are someone who will still be standing on the other side of no. And if you are still standing on the other side of the 20th no," Adam said slowly, "then you become impossible to refuse. Then," the old man said, "you become impossible to refuse." The bus arrived 18 minutes later. The old man gathered his plastic bag and his walking stick and stood slowly, and Adam stood too, because the bus was his as well. On the bus, they sat 2 rows apart and said nothing more. But when the old man stood to exit at a stop Adam did not recognize, he paused in the aisle for a moment. Without looking back, he said, "Go home, sleep. Tomorrow, write the 13th application." Not because it will succeed. Because the man who writes the 13th application after 12 rejections is already closer to impossible to refuse than the man who only wrote 12. He stepped off the bus. The doors closed. Adam watched the old man walk into the rain until he disappeared. Then he sat back in his seat. He looked out the window at the wet city moving past, and something that had been clenched inside him for a very long time began slowly to open. He did not write the 13th application that night. He slept first, which was itself an act of discipline. He had learned, across 10 years, that things written in the hours immediately after rejection carry the smell of desperation, and desperation is the scent that makes the world lean away. He slept. He got up at 5 in the morning. He made tea. And then he did not write the 13th application. He wrote something else first. He opened his notebook and wrote one question at the top of a fresh page. What does impossible to refuse actually look like? He sat with that question for 2 hours, and in sitting with it, he began to see something he had not been able to see when he was moving too fast. He had been asking for permission. 12 times, in 12 different ways. He had been approaching the world with hat in hand, hoping someone would look at his dream and decide it deserved to exist. And the world had said, 12 times, "We admire your passion, but we do not fund individuals. We do not fund projects of this scale. We do not fund in this region. We do not fund without a track record." But the old man had not described asking for permission. He had described becoming something, becoming impossible to refuse. That was not a question of how to ask. It was a question of what to build. What could he build that would make him impossible to refuse? Not a proposal, not a document, evidence. He could not build a school yet, but he could build a proof. A small, undeniable, real-world proof that what he was trying to do worked. He spent 3 weeks planning. Then he called his mother and asked one question. Was there a room in the village, any room, a shed, a meeting hall, that could be used 2 afternoons a week? His mother called back the next morning. The community gathering room was available Tuesdays and Saturdays. He called his sister. His sister, whose fire he had watched go quiet at 12, who was now 26 and working in the local market and had never quite found her way back to the person she had been before she stopped walking to school. "I want to start something," he told her. "I cannot do it without you." She was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" she said. The first afternoon class had 7 children. Adam drove 4 hours on a Saturday to teach it himself. Reading, basic writing, simple mathematics. He had no training as a teacher. He had a clear memory of what it had felt like to be a child who wanted to learn and had no place near enough to do it. His sister sat in the back and watched, and afterwards said, "You are not a very good teacher yet, but the children like you. They will come back." They came back. The next Tuesday there were 9. The Saturday after, 12. He documented everything. Photographs of the room, a notebook with attendance figures, short written observations after each class about what the children were learning, what was working, what was not. He began building what he had not had before, a record, not of his dream but of his results, small results, but real. 3 months in, a woman from the Regional Education Board heard about the community class through someone who knew his mother. She drove out to observe. She sat in the back of the community room and watched 17 children learning in a room that was too small and not built for the purpose, and was still, unmistakably, working. She came to find Adam afterward. She said, "I have been waiting for someone to do something like this for years. We have been trying to justify funding a school in this district. We need evidence that community engagement exists. You have just given us 6 months of it." The 13th application was submitted 4 months after the rainy October bus stop. It was different from the previous 12 in one specific way. It was not a proposal for a dream. It was a documented record of results, with the funding request attached as a natural extension of evidence that already existed. It was not rejected. Neither was the 14th, which came 6 months later from a private foundation who heard about the regional board's involvement and wanted to contribute to a project that already had government partnership. By the end of the following year, construction had begun, not the grand school Adam had imagined at 19. Something more honest than that. 8 rooms, a small library, a proper kitchen because children who have not eaten cannot learn. Named not after a donor or an institution, but after the village itself. At the opening, Adam's mother stood in the doorway of the first completed classroom and put her hand flat on the wall, freshly painted, new and real, and did not say anything for a long time. His sister was standing beside him. She had been, since the community classes began, his most essential partner, the one who knew every family, every child, every complicated dynamic the village contained that no grant application could have told him about. She had gone back to learning herself. Quietly, at first, sitting in on the adult literacy sessions they had added to the Tuesday schedule 3 months in. Then openly, then enthusiastically, the fire that had gone quiet at 12 was burning again. My friend, I have told you this story because of the bench, not the school. Not the 13th application, or the construction, or the opening day. The bench because everything that came after, the community classes, the evidence, the partnerships, the building, everything came from what Adam chose to do while he was sitting in the rain on a wet bus stop bench after his 12th rejection. He chose not to leave, not yet, not until the bus came. But in those minutes on that bench, something was decided, not loudly, not dramatically, in the quietest possible way, in the middle of rain and exhaustion, and the taste of the 12th no still in his throat. He refused. He did not refuse to feel the weight of it. He sat in the rain and said out loud that he was tired, and that honesty was not surrender, it was the beginning of something. He did not refuse to be helped. He let a stranger's words reach him, did not close himself off from what the old man on the bench was offering. He did not refuse to change his approach. He stopped asking for permission and started building evidence instead. What he refused was the easy exit, the most forgivable choice, the one that would have been completely understandable, that nobody who knew him could have blamed him for. He refused to give up on the day it would have been easiest to do so. And that refusal, quiet, unheroic, in the rain with nobody watching, is why the school exists. Here is what I need you to understand. The day you refuse to give up does not feel like victory. It feels like exhaustion. It feels like the weight of every previous failure pressing against every reason to stop. It feels like sitting in the rain, but it is the most important day of your entire story, because everything that follows, every right step, every piece of evidence you build, every door that eventually opens, follows from that one decision. The world is full of people with dreams who gave up on the day before the thing that would have changed everything. I do not say that to haunt you. I say it because you do not know which day that is. You will not know until you are past it. The only protection against giving up on that day is this. Practice refusing to give up on every day that asks you to. Build the habit so deeply, across so many ordinary difficult days, that when the extraordinary difficult day arrives, refusal is simply what you do. You have a school inside you, or a business, or a community, or a piece of music, or a book, or a relationship that is worth more than the difficulty it is currently costing you. Something real and true that has been waiting for the version of you that refuses to give up when it is raining. That version of you is not born. It is built, one refused giving up at a time. If this story reached you, like this video right now, not for me, but as a record that you heard this today and it mattered, share it with someone who is sitting in their own rain right now and might need to hear that the bench is not the end of the story. Tell me in the comments, what is the thing you are refusing to give up on? I want to know. Because the dream you name out loud is the one that becomes harder to abandon. I will be back soon with another story. Until then, remember this. The day you refuse to give up is rarely the day it feels possible. It is the day it feels impossible, and that is exactly the right day to do it.